The Space Force is quietly building something that sounds like it came from a Tom Clancy draft that never made it to the publisher. It's called Golden Dome, and it involves interceptors floating in orbit, waiting to swat missiles out of the sky before they even leave the neighborhood. The first contracts have been awarded, the money is starting to flow, and the physics is about to get a workout. If you think the future of warfare is composed of drones and cyber attacks, then wait until you see what's happening above your head. Hello, my name is Gene Botkin. I work in cybersecurity for the space domain, and I'm putting together a club for people who want to take part in the new space economy. Today, we're talking about the Space Force's first contracts for Golden Dome, the country's first space based interceptor network. Let's begin. The story begins with a familiar American pastime, which is announcing an enormous defense program while carefully avoiding specific details. The Space Force recently awarded its first prototype contracts for Golden Dome, a space based missile interceptor system that sounds like a cross between Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative and a very expensive science project. The announcement landed with a tone of calm inevitability, the way you might announce a family road trip, knowing full well the car hasn't been serviced since Bush was in office. Golden Dome is pitched as a layered homeland defense shield, except this layer sits in orbit and moves at 7 kilometers per second. According to the Space Force, these are the first official contracts for space based interceptors, which will eventually try to shoot down enemy missiles in their boost or mid course phase. This is the kind of thing that missile defense engineers dream about and budget analysts whisper about like it's Voldemort. The unveiling took place in the Oval Office, a place ideally suited for big promises about complex systems that will definitely require more money later. The Vice Chief of Space Operations described the program in careful language. He explained that the system is meant to counter sophisticated threats, such as missiles launched from unexpected directions. That's a polite way of saying other nations have figured out that the classic east to west or west to east missile paths are a bit predictable, and Golden Dome intends to solve that. The Space Force is using other transaction agreements to do it, which is the defense procurement way of saying, we'd like to move fast and avoid paperwork. OTAs allow the government to skip a lot of traditional regulation, which is either efficient or terrifying, depending on your view of defense contracting. OTAs also mean that no one has to reveal the winners yet, or the dollar amounts, which helps everyone dodge press calls from reporters who have mastered the art of budget-related disappointment. The idea of a space-based interceptor isn't new. It shows up every decade like an old rock band trying another reunion tour. The difference now is that the strategic landscape is shifting. Potential adversaries can launch missiles from mobile platforms, submarines, or locations that make traditional ground-based shields less reliable. If your defensive umbrella only points in two directions, eventually someone tries coming at you from the third. That's where orbiting interceptors come in. They sit in space, watch for launches, and move fast enough to intercept during the boost phase, when the missile is still climbing and can't throw decoys or play clever mid-course tricks. In theory, this is ideal. In reality, it's like trying to hit a baseball while standing on a merry-go-round that is accelerating. The contracts awarded this week focus on boost phase interceptors, mid-course interceptors, the ones that target missiles while they're coasting through space, come next month. The rapid scheduling gives the whole affair the vibe of a cooking show challenge. Contestants, you have 3 years and at least $175 billion to cook up the world's first orbital missile net. The competition begins now. That estimated number, $175 billion, represents the initial price tag. But people familiar with American weapons programs know this means the real price tag is currently hiding behind a curtain and will reveal itself later when everyone is too invested to back out. The official claim is that the first interceptors could be operational in 3 years. Engineers I know say 3 years might be enough time to design the brochure. Still, the ambition is real. The idea is to stop missiles before they become diplomatic problems. A missile launched from a ship or remote site could be intercepted before the world has time to wonder who's being targeted. From a strategic standpoint, it's an attempt to restore predictability to a world full of nations experimenting with mobile launch platforms and orbital intelligence. Boost phase intercept is the hardest part. You need perfect detection, perfect timing, and perfect orbital alignment. If any of these fails, the interceptor becomes an expensive ornament in space. Worse, putting weapons in orbit raises ethical and diplomatic debates. The Outer Space Treaty does not forbid conventional weapons up there, but it does guarantee that adversaries will treat it as an invitation to build their own. And once you start putting interceptors in orbit, someone else starts putting the anti-interceptors in orbit. And soon the whole neighborhood goes downhill. There is also the matter of debris. Hitting a missile in the boost phase is tidy, but hitting it mid-course can produce orbital shrapnel that floats around for years, like confetti from a party that never ends. The Pentagon says they're working on that, and I'm sure they are. But space has a way of punishing optimism. Now let us consider the timeline. The prototype contracts awarded this week were handed out through Space Force acquisition units known for moving quickly. Next month begins another competition for additional interceptors. Now let us consider the timeline. The prototype contracts awarded this week were handed out through Space Force acquisition units known for moving quickly. The Defense Department reportedly wants early demonstrations soon after, which is Pentagon language for "we want at least one successful test before Congress asks what happened to the last $10 billion. It's the kind of ambition great powers pursue when they realize geography alone no longer guarantees safety. The strange part of all this is that the Space Force is being asked to build a system that merges physics, engineering, diplomacy, and congressional budgeting into one project. And that's like juggling bowling pins while somebody keeps handing you anvils. It also signals that space is now a fully recognized warfighting domain, not theoretically, not in a PowerPoint, but in the form of actual hardware being designed to fire on actual missiles. Golden Dome represents a pivot point. Once a nation starts placing armed interceptors in orbit, it reshapes alliances, adversary behavior, and the very definition of national defense. It creates new vulnerabilities, too. Once your missile defense sits in space, your enemies target space. Anti-satellite weapons, cyber attacks on ground stations, and supply chain interference all become part of the daily threat model. But that is the price of ambition. If you want deterrence in a world of novel threats, you build systems that force adversaries to pause and think. And maybe that pause is the difference between peace and the news alert that ruins everyone's afternoon. Golden Dome is only beginning. The contracts are prototypes, the technology is early, and the public details are thin. But it represents a shift in American defense thinking. And once programs like this appear, they tend to grow rather than shrink. In 10 years, we might look back at this moment, the same way aviation historians look at the Wright brothers, as the first signs of a world about to change shape. And if it works, the missile-age version of the high ground will not be a mountain or a bunker. It will be orbit. And the view is great. The stakes are higher, and the margin for error is microscopic. If you enjoyed this breakdown, then hit like, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the future of space power. This has been Gene Botkin with Elenarda. End transmission.